I gave myself 3 months to learn the horn, starting as a complete beginner and ending with a performance in front of real horn players. So let's see how I did. This video is part of a larger series where I'm trying to learn every instrument in the orchestra. My first instrument was the harp, and for the second instrument, I chose to learn the horn. So let me start out by explaining where I was at the beginning of this process and what I learned along the way, and then stick around because at the end, I'll be showing you my final performance. So when I started learning horn, I had absolutely no experience with any brass instrument at all. I chose horn because I thought it was really cool. It's my favorite sounding brass instrument, and I was passionate about learning it. I didn't know at the time that it was the most difficult brass instrument, according to most instrumentalists. So I was in for a surprise when I started because it was much more difficult than I had anticipated. And compounded on top of that was the fact that I had never played a brass instrument before. So not only was I learning a difficult instrument, but I was also starting with absolutely no fundamental knowledge and no basics whatsoever. This was also my first time learning a transposing instrument, which actually didn't end up being that difficult because all of the transposition is self-contained. I don't have to worry about transposing in my mind. The only part that was a little bit tricky was when I was trying to check my pitch, make sure that I was playing the right note. I had to play the note on the piano, but I had to transpose the note before checking the pitch on the piano to make sure that I was actually right. That didn't end up being too much of a struggle, but it was my first experience with any sort of transposing instrument. So now the big question, how did it go? Well, in hindsight, it actually went a lot better than I thought it did at the time. I remember when I was actually learning the horn, I was so frustrated with myself all the time. It felt like I couldn't make any progress. I was not getting better. And there was actually an entire month towards the end of learning the horn where I refused to video myself learning the horn or document any part of it because I was so frustrated. I thought that I was doing so poorly. I felt like I was regressing every single time that I was picking up the horn. I just felt like I was getting worse, and I was upset enough to not even consider filming myself or documenting my progression because, once again, it didn't feel like I had any progression to show. When I look back on it, I can realize and I can see now that I was making so much progress, and giving up there at the end was really poor form on my part. I'm a musician, and I know that even when you feel like you're not making any progress, you really are as long as you're practicing, as long as you're dedicating time to it. But I was just so frustrated and I didn't feel like I was progressing. So I practiced less, which is obviously not the solution to not making progress. And I also was less consistent about documenting that practice and that progression. But like I said, when I look back on it, I'm actually really happy with the progress I made. I can see how well I was progressing, and it was a lot of fun to learn a completely new musical system, to learn to make music with your lips and with the embouchure and with buzzing, something I'd never done before. I only really had a background in the piano and playing the harp as I did with my last instrument journey. So this was an entirely new experience, and it was a lot of fun to learn this experience and to learn this new mechanism, even though at the time it was really frustrating and I couldn't see the fun past all of my perfectionism. Now, I've been hinting at this, but I want to talk about how difficult this instrument was in comparison to the other instruments I know how to play. Now, obviously, the only other instrument I've documented on this channel is the harp, and the French horn was way more difficult than the harp. But I also have background with a couple other instruments like the piano, and I played violin a little bit when I was a lot younger. And I can say from my experience and from my personal knowledge, the French horn is the hardest instrument that I've ever had to play. And if I'm being totally honest with you right now, I can't even imagine another instrument being harder to learn than the horn. And I'm not saying anything about becoming an expert in an instrument or how difficult it is to actually become some sort of professional symphony master at playing an instrument. I'm saying, how difficult is this instrument to pick up and learn? And the French horn, hardest instrument I can imagine picking up and learning as a complete beginner. Obviously, if you already have background in brass, it's going to be a lot easier. But if you don't, then we're in the same boat, and it's going to be super difficult if you choose to start learning the horn without any other brass background or fundamental knowledge. The only way that I can say the harp was more difficult than the horn is that the harp was more painful than the horn to play, because strumming those strings really hurts your fingers when you don't have calluses. And even when you do have calluses, it still kind of hurts. But other than that physical aspect of the harp being painful to play, the French horn was more difficult in every other way. For that reason, I really can't recommend horn for beginners to play, because as I said, I can't imagine anything being more difficult than horn as a beginner. Obviously, there are people who start off playing horn when they're young, and for those people, I say, great, you did something that I couldn't do. But if you're looking to get into an instrument and you want an instrument that is relatively approachable, horn is not that instrument. Now, if you already play, say, trumpet, then I'd say go ahead, pick up a horn. I think horn is beautiful and amazing. But if you are looking to jump into the brass family for the first time, spare yourself and maybe think about playing something that's not the horn. But the question that follows from that is, do I regret learning the horn before any other brass instrument? Do I regret jumping straight into horn? And the answer is no, but it's a very tentative no. It's no in the sense that I love playing horn and I think it's beautiful and I'm very passionate about it, more passionate about the horn than I am about any other brass instrument. And for that reason, if I had learned a different brass instrument, I don't think I would have progressed as much, just because I wouldn't have been as invested. I was very invested in horn because I like it. And for that reason, I can't say that I regret starting out on horn. But there are some aspects that are regrettable, so to speak. For one, I think that I could have progressed even further in the horn if I had some brass background to begin with. It was very difficult to build up not only the embouchure, but also all of the breath support that you need, and being able to adjust those tones in your mouth. That's something that I'd never experienced before. All of the new things that come with playing a brass instrument were compounded with the difficulty of the horn. So if I had already had some experience playing a brass instrument, I think the horn would have not only been easier, but I would have been able to progress further with the horn. So in that sense, I can say it's a little bit regrettable that I started out with the horn, because having a better foundation would have helped me progress that much more. So overall, I would say the answer is no. I don't regret starting off with the horn. And even though I wouldn't recommend it for beginner musicians, I definitely wouldn't tell somebody not to learn the horn if they really wanted to. I think the horn is incredible, and if that's something you want to learn, you should be very prepared for the difficulty that comes with it, but don't hesitate to jump in there and start playing it if it's something that you really want to do. I mean, even for someone in my position where I didn't have any brass experience and the horn was that much harder, I still loved playing it. I'm not coming away from this experience saying, wow, I'm so glad that's over, I never want to touch a horn again. I definitely want to get back into playing horn as soon as I can, because it's so much fun and I think it's a beautiful instrument. I hope that someday soon I can have a horn and I can start practicing and becoming proficient at it, because I love the potential and the possibilities that come with playing the horn, even as a beginner, not having those potentials open to me. So let's talk about my final performance and the progression that I made to get there. My final performance was early in the morning, earlier than I had ever played or practiced the horn, which usually isn't a problem on other instruments, but for a brass instrument where your lips have to be warmed up and loose to get the embouchure right, it was more difficult than I had anticipated. But I spent that morning getting ready. I took my mouthpiece home, which you're not really allowed to do, but I took my mouthpiece home and I was buzzing with it in the morning just so I could get some practice, get my lips warmed up so that I wouldn't be so stiff while I was playing. It was still an early performance, and I think that hampered me a little bit. But not only was it early in the morning, I was also the first performer to play, and it was in front of a bunch of real horn players, not professionals, but these are students at my university who are playing in the Philharmonic at my university. So these are people who've been playing horn for probably a decade or more. I was pretty nervous, but at the same time, I knew that I wasn't going to magically get better just all at once, and I wasn't magically going to get worse all at once. So whatever I was going to play, that was going to be my performance, and I was going to be happy with it. Now, immediately after finishing my performance, I was ready to wash my hands of the horn. I did not want to have anything to do with that. I thought I did so poorly. I thought that I had messed up so much, and it was an embarrassment to me and to everybody who knew me. But when I finally distanced myself from all of the emotion that went into playing horn and I looked back at that performance, I think I did really well. It might have been the best performance that I ever did on the horn. Now, I'm not saying that I didn't have mistakes. I'm not saying that I sound like a professional. What I'm saying is that I was performing probably the best that I could, and I'm very happy with that. There are some specific things that I definitely could have improved on. For example, my breath control wasn't amazing, so I was breathing in between phrases, and you could tell that I didn't have all the air I needed to get out a consistent tone. And you're going to watch the performance, and you're going to see there are some parts where my mouth just decided to stop working, and I don't know what happened there. That hadn't necessarily happened before, but if I can look past that, which I can because it's probably only 2 or 3%, maybe less of my performance, I can say I'm happy with that performance. And I think for 3 months being a total beginner at the horn, I'm really happy with my progress. And I hope that if you're an aspiring French horn player, this can give you some motivation and can also help you to see that horn is something, while very difficult, it's also very achievable. And if that's a goal you want to set for yourself, if that's something you're passionate about, I hope that this series and that this video can give you the motivation that you need to be able to tackle that challenge head on, take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and really give it your all. So now, without further ado, I want to show you my final performance of the Pie Jesu from Gabriel Fauré's Requiem.